By the late 1980s, players had overcome two grueling quests into the dominion of the sinister Count Dracula. The second was made mobile by Tiger Electronics in December of 1988, 4 months before Nintendo was set to claim the handheld world by delivering games in separate cartridges. The Game Boy landed in April of '89. It would sell 1 million units a week after showing up in the US 2 months later. Along with launch standards such as Super Mario Land and Tetris, the Game Boy featured a number of NES fan faves like Double Dragon and Final Fantasy. But before the Game Boy would come to meet the likes of legends such as Pit, Samus, or even Link, there would be a Belmont. Castlevania The Adventure was released in Japan just before Halloween in 1989, and in the US that Christmas. The adventure was known in Japan as Dracula Densetsu, or The Legend of Dracula. It was the first prequel in the series, set a century before the events in the original Castlevania. The story focused on Christopher Belmont, an ancestor of Simon. Although not noted in the US release, Christopher already existed in the lore of Castlevania and was mentioned as the last Belmont to have defeated Dracula before Simon in the original Japanese manual. When compared to Castlevania and Simon's Quest, the adventure had much simpler gameplay. Hearts replaced health, and there were neither sub-weapons to manage nor stairs to climb. There were only 4 stages, and Christopher only had 3 lives, after which the game ended. He could gain extra lives by accruing points. While most of the gameplay variations served to streamline the complexity, a timer was added to keep the player moving. Although the resulting game was a less dynamic Castlevania, the adventure served its purpose in the early age of portability, where quick, basic games were the norm. More technically advanced systems sprouted up, like the NEC's Turbo Express and Sega's Game Gear, but after crushing Atari's Lynx, Nintendo still had the generational lead. Adventure's sequel would do just fine in black and white. In 1991, Christopher Belmont returned for Castlevania II. Its Japanese counterpart Dracula Densetsu 2 was released in July, while Belmont's Revenge hit the US in August. 15 years after the adventure, Dracula captured Christopher's son, Soleil. Using the boy's powers, Dracula was able to regain human form and rebuild his empire from stone and dirt. This time, Christopher had a little more help. He was able to use holy water or axes as sub-weapons, and a password system saved his progress. Initially, Christopher was able to choose from 4 different levels. Each zone was based on a different elemental theme: plant, cloud, rock, and crystal. The 4 could be attempted in any order, and their completion exposed Dracula's castle, revealing a drawbridge to Christopher's destiny. Christopher's adventures may have ended with Belmont's Revenge, but they would be retold again. Both would be included in the Konami Game Boy Collection compilations. The adventure appeared in Volume 1, while Belmont's Revenge wasn't released until Volume 4. The adventure also received a recent update in 2009 in the form of a WiiWare reinvention Rebirth, featuring 2 extra levels and the use of sub-weapons. The Game Boy would not bear a Belmont for 6 more years, but the little system was revisited by the Count in 1993. In stark contrast to the gothic luster of art like Kojima's, Kid Dracula was meant to be whimsical rather than horrific. It was a sequel to Akumajo's special Boku Dracula-kun, which only saw daylight in Japan 2 years earlier. After waking from a long slumber, the pale and pudgy Kid discovered the lumbering beast Garamoth had challenged him. Kid Dracula certainly didn't stand for that, and challenged Garamoth right back. Among multiple later cameos, Garamoth, renamed Galamoth in an ongoing Japanese-English translation variation, appeared as a boss near the top of the inverted castle in Symphony of the Night. Even after the PS1 behemoth ushered in a new era, the Game Boy still retained its simplistic button configuration and monochromatic color scheme. Near the end of the 20th century, a woman picked up the vampire killer whip for the first time. Although the US received Castlevania Legends in 1998, the game was released the prior year in Japan as Demon Castle Dracula Dark Knight Prelude. Legends rewound to the origin of the Belmonts' grudge against Dracula, which Lament of Innocence would write over 5 years later. On her travels, Sonia encountered Alucard, not surprising given his symphony was sung months earlier and was forced to duel with Dracula's rebellious heir. Sonia eventually would have a child, who would also grow up to fight Dracula. Considering that 8 years had passed, the differences between Legends and Adventure were not substantial. Sonia had 3 lives, like Christopher, but could restart the stage she was on after dying. Sub-weapons became soul weapons in the form of fire, ice, wind, saint, and magic. One addition was that Sonia could enter a powered-up burning mode once per life or level. With only slight improvements, Sonia's saga was soon forgotten. In addition to being retconned out of lore, Sonia also suffered the crushing defeat of being one of the major characters in the horribly misnamed Castlevania Resurrection. Igarashi was quoted as saying Legends was something of an embarrassment for the series. Legends didn't do much its predecessors hadn't, but that could also be blamed on the evolutionarily stubborn Game Boy that took 9 years to go color and another 3 to upgrade its hardware entirely. In 2001, Nintendo unleashed the 32-bit 512-color Game Boy Advance. The powerhouse portable kicked off its library with recognizable brand names including F-Zero Maximum Velocity, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Earthworm Jim, and Castlevania Circle of the Moon. Much like the N64 series, Circle of the Moon featured no Belmonts. Instead, the orphan Nathan Graves was the playable character. After his parents were slaughtered in an attempt to destroy Dracula, a man named Boris Baldwin trained Nathan, along with his own son Hugh, to be an expert vampire hunter. 10 years later, a disciple of Dracula named Camilla attempted to revive her master. Camilla was most likely based on the title character of Sheridan Le Fanu's gothic novel Carmilla, who is also referenced as the boss of Laruba Mansion in Simon's Quest. The hunt for Dracula charted the castle map and crossed into another dimension. Camilla's cataclysm separated the pupils from their master, and the two repeatedly found and eventually fought each other in their struggle to bring Morris back. Circle of the Moon adopted the 4-year-old Metroid map procedure. Nathan leveled up similarly to Alucard, and slaying bosses granted new abilities. Nathan could also utilize the dual setup system, or DSS, which joined 2 cards that had different attributes on them into one outcome. There were 20 different cards to mix and match, allowing for dozens of combinations. Nathan could possess a variety of sub-weapons, unlike many previous Portabelmonts, and all the Castlevania classics were present. In addition, Nathan had various stats he could raise as he leveled that affected different aspects of his character. The Battle Arena added another challenge as well as different modes that activated each other. Magician mode led to fighter mode and so on, and each new option stressed a certain aspect of gameplay and diminished others. The first GBA Castlevania did what its forefathers could not: sell over 1 million copies. Despite the game's warm reception, Igarashi was again displeased with certain aspects of this portable addition to the canon. Circle of the Moon was eventually erased from the timeline in 2002. Although Igarashi cited the game's inception as a standalone title as the reason for its removal, Nathan reluctantly joined Sonia on the cutting room floor. To steer the series back on course, Igarashi assumed control of production to assure the next entry would be accepted in the timeline. Harmony of Dissonance, or Concerto of the Midnight Sun in Japan, featured the grandson of Simon Belmont, Just. Set 50 years after Castlevania 3, Just and his friend Maxim set out to rescue their friend Liddy, trapped like so many before her in a formidable castle. Juste was forced to leave the wounded Maxim but rediscovered him, like Nathan finding his pal Hugh on several occasions. Juste eventually realized he was trapped within two versions of the same castle, and the projections were powered by the two aspects of Maxim's mind. Harmony of Dissonance was Symphony of the Night, with different sub-weapons and no familiars. Juste wielded the Belmont's family heirloom, the Vampire Killer, and collected upgrades for it instead. Unlike Symphony, the split worlds reacted to each other. Destroying one area might affect the opposite block of the map. The castle also held a room Juste could decorate, purely for his own amusement. Fans and critics loved Harmony of Dissonance but hated its score, which some publications felt comprised the worst of Castlevania's songs. Igarashi did not consider Harmony a hit, but admitted the music was sacrificed for the sake of the graphics. Since the eye-catching visuals were a high point of praise, the game's supporters believe it was a wise choice. Harmony of Dissonance was in development, Iga was also overseeing a third GBA game. The sibling project shared many of Harmony's elements and ran on the same engine, so the team kept it fresh by fast-forwarding to the year 2035 and moving from Transylvania to Japan. Michiru Yamane helped the series recover from Harmony's lukewarm audio with her third franchise composition. Released within days of each other in both Japan and the US, Aria of Sorrow and its Japanese counterpart, Minuet of Dawn, appeared on shelves in May of 2003. Aria's hero was Soma Cruz, a transfer student studying in Japan and visiting his friend Mina. On the night of an eclipse, the two were drawn via a mysterious rift to Castlevania. Upon entering the grounds, the pair was greeted by an incognito Alucard who explained that Soma possessed mystical powers that allowed him to absorb the strengths of monsters. Naturally, Soma reluctantly set off through the castle, encountering a number of characters such as Yoko Bellmaids of the Dracula's Curse Bellmaidses, an army vet turned vendor named Hammer, and Julius Belmont, who last destroyed and sealed away Dracula in 1999. The fanatical Graham Jones believed he was the vessel of Dracula's return, forcing Soma to strike Graham down and inherit his curse. Soma disappeared into the Chaos Realm as Julius vowed to follow him and destroy the evil within. The most notable change to Iga's machine was the addition of Soma's tactical soul system. Soma could store up to 4 different types of souls: Bullet, Guardian, Enchant, and Ability. Only one Bullet, Guardian, or Enchant soul could be active at any given time. Bullet souls were support abilities like sub-weapons, and Guardian souls were temporary bonuses like summoning familiars. Both types consumed MP when active. Enchant souls provided a bonus as long as they were equipped. The key to the puzzles and challenges often involved the application of the different tactical souls. Aria was padded out with Hard Mode and Julius Mode, in which you played as Julius Belmont. Aria of Sorrow was given a nomination for GBA Game of the Year and high marks from other publications that had criticized the shortcomings of the series on handhelds. It enjoyed the best reviews and suffered the worst sales of the Castlevania titles on the Game Boy Advance. When Nintendo's handheld technology was ready for version 5.0, Castlevania had overcome its 3D growing pains. 3D handheld graphics were also becoming a reality, but eager to revisit the tactical Soul system and the story of Soma Cruz, Igarashi wanted to stick to scrolling sideways. The GBA bowed down to the Nintendo DS in the fall of 2004. For the first time in Nintendo's portable history, Castlevania would not be there for its launch. Dawn of Sorrow, or Cross of the Blue Moon in Japan, was released in late 2005 and compounded on the structure of the first game. Soma still had Soul, although Guardian familiars could now be directed with the stylus, and Yoko Bellnades offered to upgrade your weapons via Soul Fusion. A magic seal system capitalizing on the new touchscreen support flashed illuminated symbols during boss battles, and the player had to trace the design. Dawn of Sorrow also contained a Julius mode, which along with the returning Belmont made Yoko Bellnades and Alucard playable, a grouping reminiscent of Trevor, Sifa, and Alucard from Castlevania 3. The story centered on a cult led by Celia Fortner that was bent on bringing the Dark Lord back by destroying Soma. Two of Celia's lackeys, Dimitri and Dario, were candidates for receiving Dracula's soul when it was released. Not wanting much more to do with Dark Lords, Soma set out with Julius, Yoko, Hammer, and Alucard to destroy the cult. After defeating the cult and destroying a foul collection of souls known as Menace, Soma was once again left to ponder his looming fate. Dawn of Sorrow made reviewers happy enough to give it an A average, and within weeks it sold into the hundreds of thousands. Seeking more cues from the classics, Iga recalled the character swapping in Dracula's Curse and the modern conflict of bloodlines to open up another portal in the timeline. Portrait of Ruin, or Gallery of Labyrinth in Japan, was released on December 5, 2006 in the US. Gameplay required both playable characters, Jonathan Morris and Charlotte Allen, to alternate back and forth. Some challenges warranted the use of Dual Crush, in which both Slayers combined their powers to form different attacks. Portrait also featured multiple endings and modes. Much like Symphony of the Night, meeting requirements and making choices allowed the player to explore more of the castle. After attaining the best ending possible, players could unlock a prologue to Jonathan and Charlotte's story. In Sisters mode, you played as Loretta and Stella Lacard, daughters of Eric Lacard from the Genesis exclusive. Boss Rush mode, Old Axe Armor mode, and Richter mode, in which the player controlled Richter and Maria, rounded out the extras. Portrait of Ruin also utilized the Nintendo DS's Wi-Fi feature and included cooperative multiplayer. Going online allowed players to buy items from each other and lend help in Boss Rush. The main storyline featured Jonathan, the son of John Morris from Castlevania Bloodlines, and Charlotte, a member of the Bellnades Order of Mages, and was set in 1944. The vampiric villain was based on and named after real-life surrealist artist Victor Bronner, who would have been alive and well during the 40s as he died in 1966. Bronner raised Castlevania by calling forth the spirits of those who died in World War II. Within the castle walls, Bronner had constructed mystical paintings that functioned as doorways to other parts of the world. With the help of the priest Vincent Doran, who sold Jonathan and Charlotte items, and the ghost of Eric Lacard, who trained their abilities and gave them quests, the duo defeated Bronner and prevented Dracula from escaping. Portrait of Ruin was a slight shift from Dawn of Sorrow. Players leapt from painting to explore locales like London and Egypt. The gameplay relied less on the touchscreen and more on Wi-Fi. Portrait of Ruin was another DS success. The game's music, assisted by ActRaiser and Shenmue composer Yuzo Koshiro, won an award for Best Original Score. year later, PSP owners were treated to the 3-games-in-1 Dracula X Chronicles, and stylus vets heard rumors Igarashi's entire team had directly moved onto a third DS game. It would take place in the 1800s, shortly after the passing of Richter Belmont. As the clan diminished, a number of secret societies formed to study and prevent the return of Dracula. Among them was the Order of Ecclesia. The third Castlevania game designed for the DS was released in October of 2008. In Japan, it was known as the Stolen Seal. Jumping back to a more traditional part of the timeline, players controlled Shinoa, one of the Order's disciples. She was chosen by the Order's patron Barlow, who might be a reference to the vampire in Stephen King Salem's Lot, to receive the spirit of the Dominus through the magics of powerful glyphs. During the ritual, the glyphs were stolen by a colleague of Shinoa's, and with the transference incomplete, Shinoa was left with no memory or emotion. Order of Ecclesia added more layers of growth to the system. Even more RPG ingredients were included, some first touched on as far back as Simon's Quest. 20 different locations were available for Shinoa to explore, and an overworld connected them all. Quests provided Shinoa with various rewards. Being a member of the Order, Shinoa was able to use their powerful glyphs to unleash devastating magic. These symbols could be equipped or combined in a glyph union to generate various effects. When activated, glyphs ate away MP. If used in a glyph union, they consumed hearts instead. Much like its predecessors, completing the game unlocked goodies such as Boss Rush, Sound Test, and Hard Mode. One extra feature, Albus Mode, allowed the player to embark on the quest of Shinoa's glyph-stealing friend. In addition to online features similar to Portrait of Ruin, Order of Ecclesia also supported DS to Wii connectivity. When linking to the fighting spin-off Judgment, new content could be unlocked for both games. Order of Ecclesia took in the most awards of any handheld Castlevania. GameTrailers.com gave it the trophy for Best Nintendo DS Game of 2008. Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and Nintendo DS each received 3 unique Castlevania games. Konami tried to reach out to mobile users with Order of Shadows in 2007, but the game scored poorly. The ideals dreamt up by Castlevania's console pillars were evolved and articulated in these installments, and some of them sold better than the games that started the whole series. The franchise today owes a great deal to their collective accomplishments. Half of the Castlevania franchise, 15 games total, were released for these various handhelds. Keeping a steady pace is the survival instinct of any good vampire hunter. It's no surprise the Castlevania fans like to stay on the go. Part 5, the final chapter of our Castlevania Retrospective. We'll follow the blood trail through time and see it run over stories first forgotten and later reclaimed. Timelines clash as the lines of lineage and lore are drawn.